Well, hello there, Aquarius. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to your full moon forecast. We have a full moon in Aquarius, your sign, on August 11th, 2022. So welcome back. If you are new to this channel, welcome. Thank you for being here. Everything you need, from website to booking readings to Starseed Fellowship information to signing up for the email list, everything you need is in the description box below. I just want to draw attention to that. If you are usually subscribed to this channel, just make sure that you are still subscribed. I think that there may be a little bit of who knows what's going on there. Just make sure, right? And of course, if you value this content, you find it helpful, you want this channel to grow, you want other people to find it, have it recommended to others, don't forget to hit that like button and certainly share and comment on this content as you feel called. So Aquarius, welcome to your full moon forecast. We're going to be looking at the main astrological themes for the Aquarius rising, sun, moon person, from the last 2 weeks of the lunar cycle. So I would say, the disseminating phase into the third quarter moon, into the balsamic phase is the primary focus here. But we'll do a little bit of a recap, Aquarius, of the new moon in Leo, a little bit of the Lion's Gate, kind of looking at those general themes that are leading to this truly a culmination point, which is what the full moon represents. So we have the sun in opposition to the moon, and while that is a tension that is created between the two poles of ourselves, right? The sun representing our voice and our creative expression and output, and the moon having to do with our inner landscape, our feelings, our personal connections, our subconscious. And even with that tension, with that polarization within ourselves, it is in that tension that actually it's that tension itself, that polarization that is fully illuminated emotionally for us by the light of the sun. And in this moment of culmination, like every full moon, we have an experience of what has been working for us since we set intentions with the new moon, what has not been working for us and needs maybe to start being flushed away or released as we go through the rest of the lunar cycle. And certainly it will be a very powerful, emotional, intuitive, sensitive experience. And at least with the moon in Aquarius in general, it won't necessarily carry the entirety of sensitivity to the emotions and the feels as in the Aquarius sign, because there is a bit of a detachment and aloofness that we can, kind of get some respite from our own feels. But for the Aquarius person, I'm not really sure if that's necessarily going to be the case. Truth be told, this Lion's Gate for all of us, but especially the Leo Aquarius axis, boy, it has been a kind of a difficult entry from moving through the eye of the needle. It's been a little bit more disorienting than I had anticipated, and other people are certainly reporting that as well, in their own ways, and having the lag time of their physical bodies, coming into alignment with what had come through in the spiritual and the higher self, and experiences that are outside of the necessity of living through it in time and space. And so a lot of us are catching up. Our bodies are playing catch up, and there does appear to be more purging and detoxifying on a number of levels, either physically, lots of emotional aspects being released in a number of ways. And to give yourself that time to, reorient yourself if you're feeling like, whoa. I know for me, it's just been kind of like, wow, just a little bit out of it, and very energized at the same time. So truly it is the Aquarius person, as much as the sun is in opposition to the Aquarius person right now, being that it's in Leo. It's in the relationship itself that the Aquarius person really finds their own true voice, right? The Aquarius person is the water bearer. They are really holding in their identity and sense of self the resonance of the collective voice. And so this can certainly express itself in many ways, in terms of what what represents civilization? What is the technology? And that's a very loose term, right? That jug that holds water can be considered technology, right? What is the technology, either spiritually, mentally, physically, whatever it is? What is it that allows for civilization to exist and to hold that resonance beyond the experience of the materium going through its natural cycle? And what's really interesting, I think, about this whole full moon period and for the Aquarius person is that the full moon not only is in a T-square to Uranus, which is the ruling planet of Aquarius. Uranus is going to be stationing retrograde in Taurus at the end of this month, before this lunar cycle fully finishes out. It'll be in the balsamic phase, I feel like. We will look at that for sure when we look at the chart. So Uranus, being the ruling planet of Aquarius, being in a square to this full moon, meaning that it's in the realm of the inner life, the personal life, the emotional vulnerability, the root system of the Aquarius person, which again is Taurus, right? It is about the natural inherent value and energy and power of the physical material world, of the fertility of the living soil, the medium of our growth, and the natural magnetism that is experienced in the Taurus archetype. It is very physical, but just like, magnetism is a very physical experience. It can be understood, at least so far, it can be understood through physics and through the laws of physics related to matter to a certain extent, right? I mean, electricity and photons, they aren't technically matter, and so, but they're part of our physical world and they're part of our physical experience. So when we think about Taurus, it's really easy to kind of get caught up in, having it be like, money and physical material items, or, the way that we feel comfortable in our relationships, how it satisfies our five senses, okay? But that's exactly where the Aquarius person is finding their stabilization emotionally and their own power. Their own power is stabilized by this connection to the world of magnetism, the world of power and resource, inherent power and resource. So Uranus being here, being in a T-square to the full moon, and certainly being going into its retrograde before the end of this lunar cycle, I would say Aquarius, this whole full moon period and the dissemination period going into the balsamic phase, and truly this entire lunar cycle, but really right now, is about power. It's about where the Aquarius person's power comes from, where their character develops, that fourth house in Taurus, and how that is challenging the identity of the Aquarius person, either in the persona they project to the world, which can be very kind of like, again, aloof and detached, especially if you have a moon Aquarius, but and even a sun Aquarius, because the sun is in detriment to Aquarius. It's opposite Leo. So there can be almost a robotic quality here, or certainly just kind of like a shut off from one's own emotions. But it's one's own emotions for the Aquarius person that is the biggest challenge, right? Because that's the Cancer 6th house for the Aquarius person. So let's start looking at the chart. So some of this starts making actual sense and can be referenced in our fourth dimensional map and in our conception of the soul's blueprint, right? And we are definitely looking at the soul of humanity right now. So what I'm going to do here is we are going to move some things around and get into. So I'm curious to see how people are feeling after the Lionsgate, especially Aquarius people. This full moon is going to be conjunct Saturn as well, and Saturn is a co-ruler of Aquarius, and I feel like that has just been almost a little bit isolating in some ways. And it wasn't until the new moon came along that we finally, I think, started to open up a little bit and realize how much the contrast in relationship and the polarization even between who we've been and who we're becoming, or, you know, the different polarities between us and other. It's not until that became really much more obvious to our awareness individually as Aquarius people that we started to realize, oh, it's in the contrast that this is, I see now like what all of this really staunch and almost in some ways too embedded in one's personality, this Saturn in Aquarius has really been. And of course it's in retrograde. The sun is going to be opposite Saturn. We're going to look at that. But it's in the relationship that the Saturn person is, or I'm sorry, it's in the relationship that the Aquarius person really discovers their own voice. Otherwise, again, like I said, empty vessel that can just be filled with whatever, right? You become part of the Borg at that point, or, you know, depending on what other placements you have, you may find yourself being more of the Borg queen. And that's just one way to consider it. There's a lot of different ways to conceptualize this energy. So one thing I do want to point out real quick, though, before we get into the chart. So I'm going to bring the chart up and, nope. Okay, friends. I'm just doing some reformatting here. I'm going to save you the experience of having to watch it all happen. But here is the chart for the full moon, and one of the things I do want to share before we move on to this is that I am still offering the lunar transit forecast for Leo and Aquarius people at the discount rate. So if you go to my website, it's right on the home page. You can book right from there. I don't offer the 30-minute generally for the lunar transit forecast, but for the signs that are representing that lunar cycle. So this month, Leo and Aquarius, I do offer, and it's a really great snapshot or a check-in, especially for like, hey, how's the rest of the lunar cycle going to go for me? I'm an Aquarius moon person, and this full moon is going to be conjunct my natal moon. So what is that going to look like? This is a great way to get that, you know, that energetic tune-up or check-in. And of course you can do the full thing for $66. Normally it's $77 for the lunar transit reading, and I don't offer the 30-minute normally. So you can go, like I said, catalystenergies.net. You can link right to it from the description box below, and it'll take you to the website, and you can book right from the homepage. And you just have to let me know what your birth details are if you haven't already, and we can get that started for you. So I just wanted to put that out there before we really get into this material. So my friends, here is our full moon chart for the Aquarius rising person. So like I said, you see that the sun and the moon are opposite each other, first and seventh house. This is fundamental to the identity, right? For who the Aquarius person is, who they are in relationship. And when the sun comes to the sign it rules in Leo, this is where the Aquarius person really comes to know their, you know, and express themselves in relationship. So the moon meeting Saturn as well is, boy, this is one of those moments where we finally see what it's all been worth, right? And feel it, and feel in our identity that, you know, staying true to the scaffolding of Saturn as intense as it's been, and also as internally the pressure internally has been very strong here with its retrograde, but this full moon is like one of those moments where we got to see really, an answer to the spiritual agencies, to very thorough, sustained, and a victorious individual efforts. It's a large white dove bearing a message. This is the Sabian symbol for the full moon. So if you've gone courageously through a very crucial crisis, there is a deep spiritual blessing right to the heart of and deep sensitivity to the individual Aquarius person that you may even get to see kind of like a little bit of a secret prophecy of what's coming, right? And that has been difficult. We've really had to just lean into and just not even identify with, but Saturn has just been like, my way or the highway. This is what it is. And so there's conviction here with this moon, this full moon in Aquarius, and certainly a gift for knowing when to act, right? It's almost as if the realization that everything that has come so far is leading to something really important about the Aquarius identity. Like I said, this is all about power for the Aquarius person, because as society and civilization goes through its metamorphosis, then when Pluto comes into Aquarius, the Aquarius person is going to very directly go through this process of accessing this power in terms of who they are. And so knowing where the individual's power comes from is going to have a pretty distinct and very important role to play as the identity or the seed point of the Aquarius person, or the way the Aquarius person is feeling. Like if you're a moon in Aquarius, this is all going to go through massive metamorphosis, in the next starting in the next year, but certainly in the next year and a half to 2 years, and then after that, the next 18 years. So also, too, if you're an Aquarius person and you also have Pluto in Leo, if you are a quote-unquote boomer, which I really feel like is the Pluto in Leo generation, boy, you're really going to start coming into some serious power and serious soul power of why you are here for your own evolutionary purposes, okay? Big time. So here's Uranus in a T-square, like I said, to this full moon. And a T-square, as you can see, is a square to each ends of an opposition. So while this energy is being and really, this grand square is still very active. You also see that Black Moon Lilith is opposite Pluto. Boy, she continues to be involved in just about every conversation. And for the Aquarius person, Lilith has been in the 6th house and in Cancer now for a while, and is currently in its retrograde as of this full moon. And so this is the Procyon or Procyon story, opposite Pluto, yet again. This strong Cancer archetype is about the vessel that holds our vulnerability, about the womb or the chalice or the root system. And again, this is where one's personal power, their self-esteem, their own inner sense of who they are, and their loyalty and faithfulness. This is the real challenge for the Aquarius person, because the Aquarius person holds the resonance of the collective. The real challenge, the devotional practice, right, where purification and reconstitution come from for the Aquarius person, is in developing one's own root system, one's own sensitivity to nurturing, to loyalty, to a sense of belonging, to creating the nest in a lot of ways, right? To creating the container in which the heart space can give itself over to, right? This is where the challenge comes from, right? Because it's a lot easier to just let yourself be the vessel of the collective voice, because without really identifying with the one-on-one relationship in many ways, you just kind of find yourself detached from humanity, right? And if Leo is anything, it's the voice of humanity in the individual resonance, right? The power of a star like our sun to be the giver and sustainer of life, right? And it comes through that very human interaction. And so without that, the Aquarius person really does become just kind of like an empty shell, or like a cyborg in many ways. And when you are detached from that, then it can be a much more galactic or alien, and I say alien not like ET, but you can think of that extraterrestrial, but more of a less involved and less human and less combust experience, and way more in kind of the AI kind of realm, or a sense of not humanity and just mentally getting to the point of something, right? Without the experience of being human. So Uranus is pulling this energy, and like I said, this whole grand square I feel like is still engaged here. And as we've talked about before, these grand squares, these grand cross, right? These are frustrating conflicts, beyond frustrating conflicts that we don't escape from, right? It's like we are kind of caught in a box here with this grand square, and we have to just approach and deal with the fact that this is where it is and find our way into spinning this into some sort of vortex rather than getting so frustrated that we just give up. And in galactic astrology, if you have a grand square in your chart, especially if it's got starseed markings at the points, I mean, yes, it's going to be frustrating, but boy, it keeps you in your lane, because being in the material box in some ways is exactly what you came here to do. Not to be boxed in and imprisoned, but to experience Earth School. And the square and the four sides, equilateral sides, really do represent that material form that represents security and stability. Interestingly enough, here we go in our fourth house, which is where Uranus is in a T-square to this full moon. So yes, there's this sense here when we truly find ourselves identified with the source of life, with kind of sanctifying this energy and really expressing our voice through this. And this is about really valuing the relationship. And see, Venus is now in Leo at this moment too. So talk about valuing the relationship. And Venus rules your fourth house. And so Uranus, of all the signs that are going to be able to handle, I think, Uranus in the fourth like this, it's going to be Aquarius, because they're like, oh, change in the resources is, yes, that does have an impact, but really the impact that it reverberates out to a collective level is just something that is going to almost naturally be reflected in the Aquarius person, which has a lot to do with this full moon. It's almost like the persona of the Aquarius person almost reflecting the light of the nurturing and the sensitivity and the emotional aspect, reflecting it out in as like it's gonna be okay. Like, here is the sense of reward that is, it's not even reward, it's a blessing. It's a spiritual blessing for those who have sustained. And I think for the Aquarius person, this will become very clear to those who have embraced the contrast in their relationships as a means to find their own voice, knowing that ultimately that honesty, that willingness to confront the contrast is really how the Aquarius person finds themselves and their role. And they will, in fact, it'll just be like the vibe that comes off the Aquarius person in this full moon is going to be so indicative of how relationships have been approached and identified with. And now that Venus also comes into Leo, this is the passion card in the tarot, right? It is the Leo card, and you see a woman who is riding the beast, so to speak, and pushing that seed or that throbbing like energy up to the surface. And so again, valuing and identifying with the relationship, the form of the relationship. If any sign, like I said, if it's going to be any sign that can deal with Uranus anywhere, but especially in Taurus, I feel like it is going to be Aquarius. It will challenge this identity aspect, though, because these are very real disruptions, and these are very real emergences, spontaneous emergences in places that where space has been made as a result of Mars and the North Node and Uranus when they had that triple conjunction. And so it's still close enough. And this draws the energy down here again to where's your root system, Aquarius? Home, family, who's got your back? Whose back do you have? Like, where do you feel safe emotionally? Where is your sense of power emotionally and intuitively, right? Because that's going to be drawing a lot of the focus. And it's in the shifting landscape landscape of this that you actually find yourself realizing that how deep inherent worth goes, right? Really identifying what is valuable and lasting, long lasting, and what represents a natural cycle in this way. So again, this is where personal power comes from, right here. Now at the same time, Mars is in a sextile to Neptune. This is going to be something that continues to, this relationship continues to come up with Neptune in the second house. Now in Pisces, gosh, it can feel like resources just slipping through your fingers, especially with Pisces as your second house in general. But what it really represents is that the resources of existence around you, right, regardless of what they are, it really is the resonant or the experience of source, right? The love and compassion, the glue, love as the glue that holds it all together, right? The ocean of potentiality is the realm of resource for the Aquarius person. And so it's been a double-edged sword. And if you have realized how powerful this placement really is, Aquarius, then you have also come to realize that it is the realm of God consciousness or the transcendental that is really your resource, in which case this, you're only limited by your own imagination, and Pisces is great with imagination. Now, it may have been a little bit kind of like, you are just kind of up until Neptune stationed retrograde very somewhat recently, I feel like it's been kind of like I'm just, like a Hail Mary almost. I know that I had that moment at one point. I'm just like, well, the entirety of the collective spiritual experience is very much the resource in which I'm working with, but it's real foggy. It is not clear. And we've had to really deepen our intuition and really be discerning. And in some ways, we might have had to just stay put in terms of resources, not necessarily open ourselves to the full deluge of resources, spiritual resources. Now that Neptune is retrograde, we're seeing things and experiencing them with some clarity, and also it's the willful ignorance of one's ability to utilize the collective unconscious as a resource. And that's not to say that can't be exploited in some ways, because when you are detached from humanity and your own human voice, then you do exploit you do exploit that nature of the human soul and the connection to God or spirit as a resource. So there's a bit of willful ignorance with Neptune retrograde at this point if you're still not seeing things clearly in this realm. But ultimately, Mars is still in the fourth house for Aquarius, in a sextile to Neptune. It's like Mars in the fourth house has really been, really pushing downward, right? Really, and patience has been an issue here. Mars is at its detriment in Taurus. It wants to be in Scorpio, which is the realm of the South Node. It's the realm of the social and political contribution, right? The 10th house is the career, the mission, the zenith of the destiny, right? This is where Mars wants to be. And for the Aquarius person, it definitely wants to be focused on the areas of specifically from Libra on, especially of like, this is about the collective social experience. It's been very difficult for the Aquarius person, again, to see where we've come from, what we have already gone through at a karmic level, at a soul level, and allow that to kind of, dig down deeper. And Mars, it's just been about patience. And even that square to Saturn that we just had with the lion right before the Lion's Gate, again, it felt like being baited, of just like, here, you may want to act very quickly to establish or to forcefully push further down to establish your root system, where Saturn is just like, well, this piece of rebar is where the identity is really wrapping itself around right now, and it's not going anywhere. And so maybe what for the Aquarius person, what this is allowed for is for Mars to kind of, that energy of Mars, that action potential, right? To kind of get itself wrapped up in some sort of like, harness, or some sort of, wrapping the rope around itself and getting ready to like jump down, or to like tunnel in much deeper than the Aquarius person maybe had even realized, right? With Uranus kind of moving some things out of the way, the North Node also being like, oh, this is the direction we're going. Now Mars is like, oh, okay. When these new pathways are created, which that first quarter moon really helped establish new pathways, that we feel the need to make these new connections in terms of the mission, the contribution, right? Your career as an Aquarius person, whatever that is. But that starts really with, or that is contingent upon what the quality of the root system here, and the quality of the resource, I would say, with Taurus here, as well, and the stability of this. When this is changing, it can feel like that the stability of the individual is changing, but yet here is Saturn here being like this, it is in the collective and resonance, or the civilization, that the Aquarius person really finds themselves reflecting. And so while that is happening, Mars is like, okay, let's get ready to kind of start doing a much deeper dig here into what allows the Aquarius person's character to really develop, right? Because it's essential. Otherwise, like I said, you get pulled into the Borg, right? Or you get pulled into totalitarianism, or you get pulled into some form of, dark, heartless type of, societal structure, okay? And so I feel like there was a little bit of baiting in some ways, but at the same time also seeing like the necessity to dig past, to move past these old root systems. Maybe new ones I would say new ones definitely are being built. So, really, to realize that you can exist in these two places, strangely enough, as you are experiencing the square. So the Mars sextile to Neptune, right? That 60-degree angle, that's like an inner transmutation, right? The 6 is about harmony and opportunity. It's when the resource realm is going through a massive cathartic purge, right? At the most at the all of the corruption and perversion of what is otherwise meant to be a pure connection to source or God, regardless of what institution or possessions identify with that. It's this deluge of purification that is that is allowing for these new channels to not only, kind of be dug down by the deluge, right? We've talked about this quite a bit, actually, with the Lionsgate, but it also, gives Mars that, Pleiadian sense of we're all, this is for everyone, not just for myself, but the warrior starts acting in accordance with, what it is that cultivating that energy for the collective enjoyment and not just for the individual. So this is going to be, this is a sextile, right? So there's some helpfulness, but it requires some sort of participation to really benefit from this relationship. Lilith opposite Pluto, the Procyon story. Again, it's in that 6th house of that inner containment and that emotional sensitivity to oneself, to one's inner sense of security, and to creating a space that allows for that, right? Again, this is the challenge of the Aquarius person, is to bring more of that divine feminine nurturing, almost like high priestess energy into the daily life. And this is this is something about the divine feminine that is really strongly coming through, just in general, but especially for Aquarius, because for as masculine as this sign seems, because it's fixed air, and it is, it's more of the lightning bolt that can either destroy or conduct the power of the spark of life through the medium of the inner waters, right? And that's really what Cancer truly represents, the inner waters. And how the Aquarius person cultivates that, challenges themselves, finds healing through this, is up to the individual. But this is the real challenge here. Oh boy. Wow. Okay. So when we go through this week leading up to the third quarter moon, which is going to be a very it's going to be one of those moments where we feel again into what needs to be released, a sense of reorganizing ourselves when it comes to where this power comes from in our emotional root system. There are things that will need to be adjusted to as the sun is really identifying with the threshold of a new challenge in relationship, whatever that is. Okay, so when we get to that point, as I'm going to show you right here, remember we're coming back around to the Pleiadian revival. This is the moon conjunct the Pleiades. It'll be in a square to the sun. These third quarter moons are always those moments of crisis of consciousness and inner reorientation in relation to what was culminating at the full moon. And so, yes, there is a sense of like the identity and persona of the Aquarius person is going to be just like, so beautifully reflecting this identification with the relationship as a whole and the value and meaning of that one-on-one interaction for the Aquarius person, that it's going to highlight this spiritual blessing, this sense of conviction, or even being able to follow through with something, because there's this moment of like, it's all, I see what it's all been doing and what it's all been for, right? Where Saturn has not been very maternal or sensitive to the needs of the individual Aquarius, right? Saturn is just dad putting the foot down, be like, no, this is just what you're doing, right? And it has caused a lot of problems in relationship. And I feel like it has only been recently, since Mercury, the Sun, and Venus now coming into Leo, that the Aquarius person can finally like wrap their heads around how important it is to value the relationship and the contrast in the relationship as a whole, so that the resonance of the collective voice actually is able to change and to, get at a higher frequency perhaps. I don't know. It's just an idea. So, but this third quarter moon, remember the eclipse, the Scorpio eclipse at the beginning of June. This is where the sun was. And so while we were very identified with that moment, what was eclipsed was how, the feeling and what was going to be, what otherwise would be fully illuminated, which is something that really need a lot more time to fulfill. And certainly to run its course, right? And so the sun's going to be passing over this point. Mars in a trine to Pluto in these last degrees. Well, that already happened during the week, but still in these last degrees of Taurus and Capricorn. Remember, this is the Pleiades, right? And part of the Pleiadian dynamic has a strong warrior quality. That is part of late Taurus, is that it represents an individual who has command over their material environment, whether that be their body, their resources, their land, or their own energy, right? And Mars in this trine to Pluto in the 12th house, right? All of these karmic contracts for the Aquarius person, all going through change, right? The transcendental realm, the astral realm, the Akashic realm, going through deep metamorphosis while Pluto's been in this area for years now. And it's reaching this, this point of there's still something to gain from getting to the top of the mountain but all of the pathways have been cleared away now. But that does not mean that there isn't a pathway within. And that seems to be the biggest challenge for the Aquarius person, is to find that pathway within, which means establishing a sense of connection to what is below, to find a sacredness in the actual process of nurturing and nourishment and sustainment and replenishment, and the cardinal energy of relationships, and how you create a space in your own everyday life to be kind of this very goddess, divine feminine energy. And then your relationships really do allow you as an individual to bloom, right? It's just so beautiful. So, but what's going on in the fourth house here for the Aquarius person is really just so substantial in terms of, where the inherent value really lies, in terms of where the individual is rooted emotionally, intuitively, psychically, and very much about personal power. So this, whatever's, this deep metamorphosis and the astral in the Akash for the Aquarius person is very much stabilizing the adjustment that Mars is kind of, really using a lot of courage and warrior-like nature to adjust to. There's an understanding in some ways, or an acceptance. And you can really think of this literally, if you want to, right? Because this is conjunct Algol as well. Not just the Pleiades, but also Algol which is the head of Medusa. Right? So you can see this part of Mars just being like the Perseus character that's like shink off with its head, off with the head of Medusa, right? That has the snakes, the serpents coming out everywhere, right? This is an unbridled kind of serpent energy that is just taken over the body, right? And it's gotten to a point where that energy can be repurposed for something so much more beneficial than what Medusa is unfortunately using it for, because it is just wreaking havoc and having an impact on anyone that comes in a line or comes into contact with it. So think about Mars as like this Perseus character in your life, and in this area of your inner life, your personal life, your own feels, and how that, it's like Pluto is the agent of death, of course, and rebirth. And when Mars is willing to cut off those rotten root systems in general, it is so stable and stabilized and foundational with what is getting repurposed and transformed at a spiritual and soul level for the Aquarius person, right? But it does take some acknowledgement in the here and now of what needs to be cut away. And that doesn't mean new root systems can't grow forward or grow down, right? That doesn't mean it at all. Now, some people, this may literally mean being, uprooted in many ways, and perhaps that is what needs to happen. But I would say it's more about a space or a shift in the landscape that allows the root system to find a new direction, to go deeper, right? To establish a much firm and stabilized connection to the world around it. Wow. But it's not going to be easy because, and I think really the big issue with this square for the Aquarius person is the very human and deeply sensitive experience of the adjustment here and what it feels like. It's one thing for Mars to like chop off the head of the Gorgon. It's another when we are the Gorgon and we're feeling that part of ourselves also needing to be released. There's going to be some serious grief. And in fixed star and ancient astrology, Algol and even the Pleiades, like there's a strong connection to bereavement and grief here. So I just feel like that this will be a very very bitter, and I wouldn't even call it bittersweet. That's not the right word. It's just going to pull us down into, again, what is being released, what is being kind of cut away, what is being, almost very forcefully in some ways cut away in this area of family, home, of origin, tribal identity, national identity, right? Fourth house, and Cancer too is especially it's very patriotic. So, and the sun over here is like, we are at the galactic degrees here of Atlantis, and we are moving into a dawn of a new day here. And so I just get this sense here, Aquarius, that it's going to be like, oh. And it may be more than just like, oh, it might be incredibly powerful grief, but it'll be kind of like after the fact, Mars crossing this point and in a trine to Pluto. And then you're like, oh, that's what that feels like. Wow. That's really powerful. But that doesn't mean that we can't also be excited about what's coming, and be aware of and really accept the challenge of new relationships and a new person in your relationships, right? There may be a real changing of the guard here in terms of your own family history and what new relationships you're making now, right? And this is all part of the Aquarius transformation and extraction of power from the soul's journey and the karmic journey. So, oh boy. And as let's see here. I feel like that we should go back a little bit before we get to this third quarter, because there is something really worth pointing out here, which is the sun opposite Saturn as well. So we have our full moon. We saw where the third quarter is going to lead us. So what is going to really be happening leading up to this point? So there's quite a bit, actually. So Mercury is in Virgo. It's in its home sign of Virgo, right? Mercury rules Gemini, the 5th house for the Aquarius, and rules Virgo, which is the 8th house. This is another designation of power in this reading, in this forecast for Aquarius. Now, Mercury moving through Virgo, especially in the 8th house. Again, this is where the capacity to blend contrast, but not to fully dissolve oneself into that contrast is really important. And Mercury is going to be able to analyze. It's going to be able to go into the shadow without getting lost down there. It's going to be able to know the difference between your own mind and the shadow mind, right? This is really, really important to consider, because this is the area where Mercury is going to not only enter its shadow, it's going to be in opposition to Neptune down in the 2nd house, okay? So again, resources and power, inherent power, generated power, is something that is going to be coming up again for the Aquarius person throughout this whole time. So first off, though, we're going to look at this Sun-Saturn opposition, which is on the 14th. So you're looking at Sunday the 14th. The Sun comes into opposition with Saturn. This is like the child in opposition to the paternal type of energy. And it doesn't need to be a father figure necessarily, but the energy that represents the scaffolding and the material law of nature in relation to not only the fractal of life and the material universe and time, but also the resonance of the collective voice, the resonance of civilization, and how that lasts even beyond the establishments that created it in the first place. That's kind of the mark of a real continuity here. So while we are, as Aquarius people, identifying with our own voice in relationship, finding ourselves through relationship, finding our voice in that one-on-one interaction. Venus now in Leo, also bringing the sense-based feels into the relationship, the entire form of the relationship. Is it balance, right? Do I feel passion in my senses in this relationship, and the value of the relationship to bring that passion out through those Venusian qualities of beauty, of harmony, of attraction, right? I mean, Venus in the 7th house is like, you are going, this is where anima, right? I always get them confused, right? Anima and animus. I mean, just know that if you are however you identify, if your intention is to be attractive as a feminine or Venus, feminine person, a woman, the woman gender, whatever, it doesn't matter. The idea here is that if that's your intention, boy, oh boy, it's going to be real strong. That beautiful flower is going to be blooming in relationship, and you're going to be feeling it. And that's something to keep in mind, as this opposition with Saturn is still pulling the energy very densely into your persona and identity, and the fact that it is really for those who are able to really not take advantage of the small things, this is something that the identity can find, again, some backbone or solidity, at least internally, while there is this more, human voice and more sovereign, shining version of ourselves in the relationship that is like, I'm on a spiritual mission, right? And that opposition, I feel like, is just going to be, again, that playful, joyful part of ourselves. Venus coming into the 7th house, where we are attracting, we are feeling passion, right? We are feeling that lust for life, lust for relationship, pulling that energy towards us. And Saturn is just kind of a bit of a reality check here of just like, it's still, you are kind of the barometer in many ways to who you are in your relationship still, right? It can't all be, it's identified with the relationship and really putting a lot of value in it. But again, realizing that the inner authority is really still in the persona of the Aquarius person, because the Aquarius person is holding the resonance of the entire situation. And so if that is out of whack, or if that is finding some serious backlash or whatever, then you know that there is something out of alignment here. And I think it's just going to come up that much more strongly after the full moon, and really just kind of test that full moon of like, oh, I'll see. You may find yourself being like, oh, I actually have a sense here, really strong intuitive sense of what's coming and what will be brought out of me in this relationship or in my relationships. Okay, so I don't. It's kind of hard to say how this is going to affect every Aquarius person, right? You don't want to generalize all of us, but I do feel like that, I'm on a spiritual mission, right? And it's the relationship that carries us, right? And it's the relationship that draws our passion in our very sense-based reality out of us. But there's something here in our identity that is giving us a warm appreciation of everything that's come forward so far, that we've been aware of for a very long time. So if you find yourself a person that has had a lot of issues with people in your life, people you're close to, any of this one-on-one interaction, again, if you've stayed true to yourself and have really been able to withstand the inner pressure of Saturn in this world, in this placement that has really made relationship a little difficult, you're going to start to see that it is not, that it has been, you're going to be able to really have an impact, I feel like, and in relationship now. The communication, I feel like, is going to start really, communication is going to start becoming a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but the capacity to really get into the space of the power that's generated in relationship. You're going to be more discerning, more analytical, more discriminatory about it with Mercury in the 8th house and Virgo. And that's going to be very important, because you can get very carried away here in relationship land, Aquarius, if you are not careful. So Mercury in the 8th too is going to be like, let's kind of confront confront here. One thing to have this primal energy of where we've been, and that's at the root of us. It's another entirely to, be able to confront that from your own consciousness. And I just think that's going to be the essence of this opposition. You also, as we go forward, let's go back towards, oh my gosh. So Mercury is going to be then in an aspect to the nodes right after this opposition, right? It's going to be in a trine to the north node, a sextile to the south node in Scorpio. Mercury for the Aquarius person is in the 8th house. And so there's something to be transmuted here in terms of where the soul has been, the power to propel forward to the soul's destiny, and certainly Mercury in the realm of the shadow, right? The realm of the truth, the realm of getting down to the bottom of it, right? Get to the root of what the root of civilization. If Aquarius is the holder of the collective resonance in their persona, the root of that civilization certainly stems from this 8th house in Virgo, which is what Mercury is really working with right now, and becoming much more open to some sort of to the inner guidance that's accessible in this area, in a way that allows for the mind not to get lost here. And this is finding a stabilized Earth trine to the North Node, which is again like still airing out the squeegeeing the third eye, or cleansing the ego consciousness, cleansing the doors of outer perception, as this is in the realm of where your personal power comes from, Aquarius, and in that experience, it is the mind, the individual consciousness in Virgo that is able to be very discerning, discriminating, and get inner guidance from a place that you really know is actually your inner power and not coming from some other, in terms of inherent worth, right? Now, you have to act on this, right, with the sextile to the south node and where you've been. You have to actually act on it to get any kind of harmony out of it. But what I do feel like is that it allows for, the acting on it can be, well, look where we've been, and a consummation already at a soul level, because you've kind of come around and figured some things out. Like you got not only to the root of civilization, but then you were able to use that power to to put towards a very well-lived and harmonious life, and to see the whole picture. And I think that's where this sextile can really come in handy at this point with Mercury and Taurus and Scorpio, right? This north and south node. What else is going on? Venus is in a trine. It looks like it's coming into a trine with Jupiter. That's coming. That's on its way. So let's look at what we're doing here. Mercury is then in a trine to Uranus, just like it was in a trine to the North Node. So all those themes still very much apply. But Uranus is the ruling planet of the Aquarius person, so that's even more powerful in terms of the individual consciousness accessing the collective consciousness in a Earth trine in the realms of personal power and of collective or civilizational power, right? The power that's generated in cooperation or in relationship. Now, this is where Venus starts to come into a trine, a fire trine with Jupiter in Aries. And so this is actually going to cross over into the 8 to 9 degree of Leo, which is, the glass blower, right? The glass blower, and the sensitivity to the meaning, the value of the spirit, right? And where's the spirit come from? Well, that is definitely the third house for the Aquarius person. The third house being the consciousness, the breath, right? Coming through, and just like blowing glass, it's going to come through the breath of life that is really experienced in the third house. So as the full picture, right? It's like the bag of, those bags where you are if you're ever giving anybody CPR or something and you have to squeeze the bag so they can get air, it's like the bag is deflating, right? And I've talked about this a lot, but this in particular, it's like the bag is deflating in some ways, and the bag is like the whole meaning of it and provides, it's like the bellows, and it's like the bellows is like squeezing shut now with Jupiter in its retrograde, and Venus here is like, well, I need that air to like, be able to shape the relationship itself. And I think what this is really representing is the bellowing, right? The actual squeezing of the bellows in this air trine that is going to help in this way. Venus and Jupiter are both benefic, so when they are in a favorable connection to each other, especially like this in a fire sign, because Jupiter does rule a fire sign, this is I think very favorable, and it may represent kind of like that last gush, like really squeezing the bellows, like Jupiter retrograde, to give Venus the, that spirit and that communication, that expression, that individual notions, ideas, concepts, information, expression, really, to be able to shape the form of relationship and to be very sensitive to that form. So I think that's pretty favorable as well, considering that the third house is full of retrograde for the Aquarius person. There's something to still very much learn here. So then we get to our third quarter moon, as we talked about. And the week leading up to the balsamic moon and the Virgo new moon, we're going to have Mercury comes into its retrograde shadow on the 21st, a Sunday, right? And it's at 24 degrees, 25 degrees Virgo, opposite Neptune. Whew. I mean, this can be one of those like reality checks, but it also can be so hyper fixated on the form itself and what it takes to really, for the individual mind, and truly what it takes for the Aquarius person, I think, to get into this very deep, dark place of the shadow of society, at the root of civilization. An acknowledgement and an ability to recognize what it takes in this way to be recognized by the entirety of the culture, right? Kind of like a flag at half-mast. It's like a service, those who have been in service to their community and their culture, we value and recognize them by putting the flag at half-mast when they pass away. And so the opposition to this in Neptune is part of the catharsis of, or the deluge at a spiritual level, right? Truly the perversions and corruptions of the whatever institutions represent our spiritual selves, right? Our connection to each other, whatever it is, as it's being flushed out even within us, even if we're starting to become aware of the fact that this is on its way. It's going to be Mercury that keeps the Aquarius person of like, okay, not to get washed away in this place, right? To be able to keep the mind steady and know exactly what it's going to take in order to really maintain itself in this place, okay? And this is where Mercury is going to retrograde back to. So it's entering its shadow right before it comes, or it's in this opposition right before it enters its retrograde shadow. So a lot of things are going to become very obvious to us by this point after the third quarter moon. And so then we kind of spend the rest of the time here, Aquarius, really, as the moon is getting darker, going into its waning period, into its last quarter phase, into the balsamic phase. Mercury is then going to be in a trine to Pluto again. So there is this, destruction of the establishment. And for the Aquarius person, this is impacting at every level the soul is incarnated at, right? And certainly at the level of the collective karma, right? The 12th house. And, and I think that Aquarius people really are, it's very difficult sometimes to experience this level of transformation because this is at the unseen. So a lot of dream time work is happening for Aquarius people, I think, with Pluto and Capricorn, because it's in the realm that is unseen that this transformation is really taking place. So, and this is also very hard to see in. The 8th house is the Scorpio house, the depth, the fixed water. And so Mercury, this is giving it's giving a form for the mind to follow, to get out, right? And so one thing in Japanese culture, it's really big to follow the ceremony. If you've ever practiced like a martial arts, especially like Japanese karate, like the kata, it is a fighting style, but it's in a form. Reiki as well, being a Japanese energy work modality, there's a form you can follow. Shiatsu, that's more Chinese, but the idea here is that there's a form that you follow. There's a root system that is established that allows the individual to gather what it needs from the world around it in order to grow and to mature, right? And so this maturity of the mind in relation to these dark or underlying power dynamics for the Aquarius person is something that is, when you follow kind of the framework, follow the pathway that has already been established, right? Don't have to reinvent the wheel right here while the wheel is being destroyed, or the establishments in some way that the resources have created are being established, and knowing that there is another root system already on its way, and Mars has been a big part of this, that is going to allow the mind to be stable in the face of the destructive transformational energy that is happening at the unseen spiritual level. This is much more of the dark, deep secrets of ourselves, of our relationships, what we don't often see, what's hiding in the corners, what's in our subconscious that's really running the show, right? The root of civilization. And even if civilization is just, the entirety of your experience in this lifetime, it's still the root of it, and it's still very dark and hidden in a lot of ways. And so Mercury is the only deity that was able to go, or Thoth, Hermes, whatever, goes into the underworld and is able to come back out, right? And is able to shepherd the lost souls. And I think this has a lot to do as well with Thoth and Hermes Trismegistus, right? Of being the chain being unbroken in the incarnations of Thoth in some ways. Because going into this space does not have an impact on the consciousness of the soul coming back into materiality. So that's something, again, Aquarius, to remember, is that the resonance is always there. It's just a matter of what it is that's going to really shape the persona of the Aquarius person. So that's going to be the 23rd, the 24th of August. We see, again, Moon opposite Pluto, the Procyon story, yet again, coming up. Now Venus is in a trine to Chiron, coming towards the end of the month, right? And Chiron is now 15 to 16 degrees of Aries in its retrograde. This is the point of the Lion's Gate, moving from the 15 to 16 degree mark of Leo, and it's the same basic position that the Sun was in a trine to Chiron at the Lion's Gate, but now it's so much more in the feels, the sense-based feels, and our sensitivity to the relationship as a whole, and the value of it, the meaning of it, how we feel in our feels, and certainly our attraction based on the beautiful flower of our passion being really presented in relationship. And again, this is going to, for the Aquarius person, I feel like is really allowing a healing in terms of what's right, the energy that's generated in the individual consciousness of the Aquarius person, right? They've been attempting with Chiron retrograde. Now it is becoming less, it's not as easy anymore, right? There's been a bypassing in some ways, and now the Aquarius person is realizing the pain of withholding that energy, and it becomes more difficult. And I think, again, Venus is just going to be like, oh, don't you worry, like, you can't even hold this back now, right? It is, again, it's like that card in the Thoth Tarot where the woman on the multi-headed beast under the surface is pushing this throbbing, this throbbing thing, right? That's pushing it above the surface. And there's not even going to be any way to stop this, really. And it's more about, and that covenant again, right? The ability to rejoice in the brilliance of the sunshine after the storm. Very, very healing. Again, and in a way that may be very physical in your relationships, and it could be all kinds of relationships, right? So be aware of that, how that is going to be another really profoundly healing moment. Of course, as the moon is opposite Pluto again, the Procyon story again, right? That is such a deep wound that is influencing so many people that are making decisions right now, that it really does need to be resolved and healed in so many ways. The Procyon or Procyon story, and the Starseed story in particular. Wow, Aquarius. It's going to be remarkable. And then Venus comes into a T-square with the nodes as well. And, now the sun is in Virgo by the end of August. The sun is in Virgo, and we're getting close to that new moon in Virgo, which will be square to Mars. Now, Mars has moved into Gemini, okay? This is the 5th house of the Aquarius person, right? This is the realm of joy and creative output and expression. For the Aquarius person, it's the realm of ideas. It's the realm of discovery. It's the realm of, exploration and exteriorization of that, right? It's in the realm of the mind that the Aquarius person is really able to express themselves. And Mars coming into the 5th, it's like you're about to start acting on these really powerful expressions. And sometimes Mars here will take unnecessary risks, but a lot of times it's going to take some calculated risks in this area. There's going to be a big demand for action here, right? I mean, the Aquarian people that are have no voice of themselves, and they have let themselves just be influenced by the digital signal or the frequency that is coming from the tower, so to speak. Boy, if you're into Westworld at all, the 4th season that's happening right now is just mind-blowing. So many things in there that are related to what is happening now in terms of the things like that are influencing our actions, our perceptions, our behaviors, and there will be this strong, almost aggressive and certainly assertive expression for those who are being influenced by the tower, so to speak, the frequency of the tower, to start acting in a very demanding action, demanding, and acting on the demand, right? You're going to see that. And it's going to be in a square to this new moon that's going to be in Virgo, where for the Aquarius person, the intention here is to start becoming aware of the very subtle and hidden elements of the power dynamics at the root of civilization, right? Aquarius is now going to be starting, and it'll be in a square, right? There'll be a square to where Mars is that wants to act on that creative, sovereign voice that the Aquarius person has. But it is going to be very important that you are tuned into the tension and to the subtle vibrations, the subtle spiritual energies that are in the realm of power dynamics, and that are part of, that will be polarized for the Aquarius person come the full moon in Pisces on September 10th, right? Where the moon will be in the 2nd house for the Aquarius person. But that's for another forecast. But this moment here is important. Plus Mercury is already now in Libra. So we'll have just crossed that 0 degrees of Libra, which is where the Cazimi will be at the equinox. So if you've had the Lionsgate reading with me, you know that the equinox in September is not only 0 degrees Libra, but Mercury will be there. at 0 degrees Libra in its retrograde. So as it's now in its retrograde shadow, knowing that Mercury is going to come across all of this 8th house energy again, going into the 9th and back into the 8th, it's important to also keep in mind that the root of civilization in terms of the power and the energy and the resource down here in the 8th house is what gives us our meaning. And there's a lot more to go over for the Aquarius person in terms of the power underneath that, in order to not get pulled into acting on something revolutionary that's really not your authentic voice at all. Okay. And again, Venus is in a square to Uranus, now retrograde, and was in a square or a T-square with the nodes here. So again, there's this this passion in terms of the relationship and a sensitivity to the form of relationship and how it allows your passion to come to the surface, that is going to show you if you're moving in the right direction or not, right? If you're still keeping on with where things have been, or if you are really allowing yourself to ride that dragon deep into the waters of your own soul, so that you understand how that has a direct impact on the fixed waters of your relationships or society that you are participating in. So Aquarius, it's all about power for you this month, very much so. So I'm going to leave it there. That is plenty to work with for this full moon forecast. If you're interested in a reading just like this, either a 30-minute snapshot of the full moon, or to go in much more depth like this report of the major themes related to your chart as an Aquarius person, please visit catalystenergies.net, linked in the description box below. It will allow you to book that reading right from the home page. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you, Aquarius or not. It's important that I'm expressing how much I value every single person that is here. Even if you don't value this content, even if you're like, I don't like this, you at least are making a decision, right? You are coming to that choice based on your own relationship to yourself, to life, and this content. And that's all I could really ask, is that people are making sovereign decisions for themselves and not being influenced by the interference of the frequencies and digital signals and, psychological operations that continue to bombard us all the time. So if you're making decisions out of sovereignty and you really know who you are and what your goal and your missions are, then more power to you. Okay. So my friends, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Take care of yourselves. Take care of others as best you can. And I'll see you on the next forecast for our new moon in Virgo. Take care.